Hey everyone, it's Crystal here. So I'm really excited to bring you this next episode regarding burnout, and we're going to focus on stress. And a lot of people just don't realize the association with burnout and stress. They don't realize that it could be interchangeable, or they are experiencing burnout, or they are really stressed and it's causing the burnout. And some people really aren't even in tune that a lot of issues that they're experiencing themselves are related to stress induced symptoms. And this is just really important because I think this is such an important conversation to have, and I want to break it down just so you have a better understanding of how stress and burnout are related and how you can actually notice what's going on with you to identify that you are feeling stressed and perhaps now in burnout mode. And I feel like this is such a interesting topic because we tend to forget what's going on around us. We sometimes get used to the way our bodies feel, or maybe have habitual behaviors or habits that make us think and feel in a certain way, and we think it's normal. And sometimes maybe there's some medical issues going on within us, and we just don't really tune into what the bigger picture is, what really brought that on. Because if your body created it, then your body can get rid of it. And that's the true phenomenon that I think a lot of people miss out on. Rather than suppressing whatever's going on, healing it from deep within. And it requires such deep work. But like I said, stress is such a massive topic. It can lead to so many different things. And let's just actually look into what stress actually is related to in some emotional signs to show that you are stressed out. So let's start there. So it can really show up in depression and anxiety. It triggers those and actually makes them even more inflated. It makes them feel like they're just a really hard thing to deal with. And there's no doubt that depression and anxiety are very challenging symptoms to tackle and to overcome and to really get a grasp on things. And there's just so many different parts of depression and anxiety that we can dive down later just to break it down even further regarding those two things. But overall, just looking at it as a whole, the stress and these two symptoms really do emphasize them and make them perhaps be even worse when you're in that stressed out mode. So that's something to be really aware of, because we need to really listen to what's going on when you're feeling depressed. What's causing it? What's just making it stronger and more dominant in your life? What's triggering it and what is just keeping it there? And then also with the anxiety, just identifying types of anxiety that you may have and also what you're anxious towards, and trying to understand that the stress is again influencing it to be more dominant in your life. So that's one. Another is anger, irritability, and restlessness. So if you're noticing that your mood is in this constant mannerism, that there's no escaping it, essentially, that it's towards anyone and everyone, and maybe you're kind of going through like a flow where you're up one day, down one day, but most times you just don't have control over those emotions. Anger, irritability, and resentfulness is actually a very debilitating type of mood to be in, an emotion to feel. And it can really damage the relationship that you have around you, and even the one that's with yourself, because you're also having these emotions towards yourself and not being able to shed the stress. So, stress can really bring on those types of feelings and emotions as well. Feeling overwhelmed, unmotivated, and unfocused. Of course, stress can do this because it's sucking all your energy. It's taking all your helpful energy all out of you because you're so focused on maybe it's one stress or maybe it's multiple stressors. But regardless what it is, your good, useful energy that you have that makes you do things, makes you follow through, makes you enjoy even to that certain level of enjoyment, that also gets taken away because the stress is more dominant, and all these other things that you're usually motivated towards or maybe underwhelmed and maybe able to focus, these three things may just not have that dominance in your life, and yet you're the opposite. And of course, when you're feeling stressed, you don't want to do certain things. You just prefer to do something else. So you're not motivated to do your typical things because you're stressed out. And then trouble sleeping or sleeping too much. And as I've mentioned in one of my other videos, which I'll link at the very end about the signs of burnout, insomnia and as well as sleeping too much is one of the most major indicators of burnout. It's up there at the top three. And stress really does emphasize this further because when we're feeling stressed, we have trouble sleeping. Maybe we have ruminating thoughts, looping thoughts, what ifs, wishing. Maybe you're just having thoughts of how you can move through it, but feel like you're being held back, whatever it may be, or sleeping too much and getting like 8 to 10 hours of sleep perhaps, and oversleeping and then losing the day and not following through with the sun rising and the sun setting, and just completely losing yourself in that way. So finding ways that sleep is interrupted by your stress is something that you need to come in terms with, because understanding your sleep pattern really gives you a very good indicator of what's going on inside, and what's happening in your body and in your mind. So, racing thoughts and constant worry. This is a huge emotion, and it does relate to feeling overwhelmed, undermotivated, unfocused, and sleep, of course. But when you start having these racing thoughts and worry, you look too far in the future, which creates anxiety. And when you're looking so far in the future, and when you start worrying about what that's going to look like or what's going to happen, it actually holds you back to taking any steps forward because you're constantly worrying about what's going to happen. And worry is such a challenging thing for us to get a grip on, because it's normal for us to worry about what's happening in the present, where our decisions will take us, what the effects are of everything that we do. And sometimes worrying holds us back from making critical decisions or even some of the most simplest decisions, but not trusting ourselves, which creates the worry. And then the racing thoughts. Again, it's something that happens during insomnia. What if? How come? Wishing this, hoping for that. What if I did this? And these are just very damaging thoughts to have when they're kind of moving, and our thoughts move at faster than the speed of light. So imagine, and I'm sure you have, sometimes maybe you're alone or you just have some quiet time to yourself and your mind is just going a million miles a minute. It's one thing to another and it doesn't even really connect. Sometimes it can go so far outside the spectrum of where we're at that we really have to bring ourselves back and just come back to the present moment. Take some practice. Problems with your memory or concentration. And stress really shortens that short-term memory. Like, memories come in quick, but they don't remain there because we're in this stress mode. So our mind is not absorbing the memory or really taking in what's happening in front of us. So perhaps it's just something very minimal. Maybe it's something that you really had to remember to do, but you forgot because it's not part of your routine, for instance. Things like that can really get affected because you're not remembering the short-term things and also making them then long-term memories. And with memory, it's such a huge critical factor of stress. And I really want to dive down these topics that we're talking about right now even further and break them down, because our memory creates our life. And yet when you're in a heightened stress mode, things are not absorbing. You're not keeping these thoughts in your head. They're almost passing really quickly through and they're not remaining within you. And then the concentration. So, of course, when you're stressed, you're not concentrated. You're thinking about everything but what you should be concentrating on, and it really takes you away from being involved in whatever you're doing. So sometimes when people are stressed, they have an accident. And this can also further the stress because you're beating yourself up that you had the accident. And then you're talking yourself down. And then you have to deal with the accident. And sometimes, like, it's worse for you to be in this heightened stress mode and doing things at the same time where it requires your full concentration. And last but not least, making bad decisions. And we kind of covered this earlier, but of course, you're not going to be able to make the right decisions because your mind is stressed. There's just too much going on. Your thoughts aren't clear. It's really hard to problem solve when you're stressed out all the time because if you're able to problem solve, you may not be in this heightened stress mode. So this is just a quick little recap. And like I said, I really want to dive down these emotional signs about stress. Stress is such a huge part of burnout. And I'll bring another video later down the road to talk about this, just so we have a better all-around idea. But this is actually part of some of the signs and symptoms that I've mentioned in some previous videos, which I will link to after this. So let's actually dive down now about stress and really what is stress and why are we always in a stress mode? And it's natural, it's normal to be stressed. So don't think that being stressed is a negative thing. We need stress in our lives, it motivates us. We do things with it. We can set ourselves up for safety. It gives us a momentum to do something. So stress is not always a bad thing, but when it's constant stress and you're feeling it all the time, and then you're starting to notice that you're overly stressed and being overwhelmed by it, this is something that really we should look at because it shouldn't be constant fight and flight mode. And I know that term is used because your body feels that way. That's a signal that you're in a stress mode. You can feel that come through your body. And we all know how it feels, this heightened sensation. And when you're always on that frequency, it can do some really serious damage. It can also create physical symptoms, and a lot of people, like I mentioned, blame their physical illnesses and chronic issues on other things, but they don't realize that stress was the core issue or core starting point of these things. So we're going to dive down deeper because this affects your organ tissues, it affects your whole bodily system as a whole, how it operates, how it functions, and just everything about your body. And it's such an important topic to emphasize on and just to get some better understanding so we can take this at a higher level and target these issues and really reduce the stress that we carry in our lives so we can live the best life possible. And also, when things come at us, when challenging things come at us, we can deal with the stress so it doesn't take away from us, but gives us some perspective, some resilience, some coping skills that we as human beings can benefit from and still live our life to the maximum. So let's just start. So pain and tension in your head, chest, stomach, or muscles. So when you're feeling all this stuff, and most people can feel this, when you have a constant headache, for instance, it could be mild or really intense. They have migraines and it just takes everything out of them. It just completely obliterates them. They're unable to participate. They're unable to do anything. They're just bedridden. And this is a really huge indicator of stress because a lot of people actually experience headaches and use some sort of pill, magic pill to suppress the symptoms. Yet it's their body trying to tell them something. And I always figure if it's in your head, if you're feeling this pain in your head, then there's something going on in your head a whole lot deeper than I can consciously make sense of. So really paying attention to the headaches is such a huge indicator of stress, and which will lead to burnout. And then looking at the other pain and tension that you may hold in your muscles. This is something so important because, for instance, my own self, when I'm extremely stressed and at a point where I was stressed all the time in my life, before I got over that high level, when I was on that frequency, I was feeling it in my neck, my shoulders, my upper back, and like my lower arms, like my whole upper area from like uh here upward. And I couldn't move my neck. I could barely turn my head. I was needing to get massages, but even they weren't helping me. I was doing everything humanly possible, but this tension was just overwhelming. It was to the point where like I couldn't even sit properly. It was throbbing, it was causing me pain. And I have such a high pain threshold though, so that's the unfortunate issue with my own self, is that I'm able to deal. So it stayed for a long time, I would say for several years. And it didn't matter what I did to remedy it on the topical side of things, thinking about it from a topical perspective, getting massages, doing heat treatments, etc., etc. But then as I matured and did some further research for myself, because this isn't normal and I wanted to overcome this without any medications or anything, I really dove down into my mind and dealt with some issues that really, one day it just relaxed and never got it again. And yeah, sometimes you get a kink in your neck and stuff. It happens. It's normal. Happens to all of us. Sometimes, the cold wind blows too long on our neck and we have this idea that it'll stiffen our muscles. That could be true. Or sometimes I do ride a motorcycle. So sometimes when I'm riding for too long at a high speed, I get neck pain. That's normal. All normal things. But when it's a chronic issue and it's happening all the time, every day, it's not a normal situation. So, thinking about muscle pain, tension, all that within all your muscles, your joints, that all should really be considered as something that's happening and giving you a signal that there's something going on in your mind. And then your stomach. So, the stomach is the seat of all emotions. It's our second brain. And do you ever hear that phrase, you know, you got to listen to your gut, and when you don't listen to your gut, you've sometimes made the wrong decision. Well, that's because it's helping us. It stores our emotion. It's helping us think with us, with our mind. But if you're not following that, it can cause some real digestive problems, which is something that we're actually going to dive down right now in the next indicator of high stress levels. So when you're experiencing digestive issues, it could be diarrhea, constipation, nausea, vomiting. Maybe certain foods aren't setting very well with you. Maybe you've grown some intolerances. Perhaps you're having hemorrhoids. Let's be honest, it's something that happens to us. Maybe you're experiencing some fissures or anything else going around your digestive system, all the way down to the lower part of your body externally. Thinking about the external and internal as one system and analyzing what's going on with you. How come my stools aren't passing regularly? And also the consistency. And I know this is getting very private and personal, but you have to be your own doctor. You have to analyze these things. You have to listen to your body. You have to see how these systems are operating, because only you would know if they're not operating optimally. You would feel that. So, for instance, I always just use myself as an example because at least I can relate and give the most accurate information out there. So, when I was going through this high stress period, of course, I experienced the digestive issue thing. And food wasn't feeling right, and it wasn't sitting well with me, and I wasn't regular, and I wasn't constant. And then I started showing up more issues, and it just started piling on. And I saw so many specialists, and no one could actually tell me what was going on. They're like, you're all healthy. There's nothing going on. I was eating the right foods. I was being very mindful of what I took into my body. I'm very well-rounded in that mannerism anyway, of knowing where my food comes from, buying high quality food, and also a balance. But there's also a time in my life when you're highly stressed that you don't always eat that way. You try to, but you don't on a regular. So it wasn't a habit. And I'll openly admit it made me feel sluggish. I gained weight, I lost weight, gained weight, and my stomach was always bloated. I just felt really heavy, started getting some external physical signs that were very troubling. And really, like, this was terrifying to me. Like, it was just one thing after another. And you have to really tune into your digestive system, because that's trying to tell you that there's some imbalance going on in your body. I couldn't eat certain foods, so my food was really bland and boring. And I really, as you know, love cooking and love eating. So I needed to use food to fuel me in the right manners and to heal me. So, doing my own research, being my own doctor, and being enthusiastic about it to eliminate the digestive issues was one of my biggest challenges, and also something that I'm super proud of this day and age. And I I'm not a promoter of anything, but I do want to recommend and mention I listened to this podcast called The Model Health Show, and that was my true awakening and guiding light for how to deal with your body and how to use and gain a better understanding, but how to use what's available to you to live the most optimal life and to feel good in this vessel that we have. So, digestive problems, huge indicator that your stress levels are high, and really something that you need to dive down and look into further. Reproductive issues. So this could be lowered sex drive, painful or irregular periods, problems having, babies, and being able to regulate that system to be fertile, and also sperm production in men. Like, these are things that we don't really think about. We don't dig deeper. We don't realize that perhaps maybe not being able to get pregnant, or perhaps maybe a lack of a sex drive, really is deeper within. And what's normal? There's not really a threshold to say what's a normal factor that we should all be living towards. But remember, when you do all these things, when you have sex and stuff, that really releases some great hormones and endorphins into our system. So think about when you're stressed, you don't have that motivation, you don't have that desire. And it's so healthy for us. It's a natural part of life. It's the way humans are designed. So when you're feeling stressed, you're not interested. You're not going to have the motivation. You're not going to have the drive. You're not going to be able to conceive unless, of course, you are. But some people that have issues conceiving don't realize that they have really high stress levels. Perhaps you're having erectile dysfunction, and some people don't realize that that's due to stress sometimes. And so it can also be other things, and I'm not denying that. But looking at stress and how your stress levels are could really affect your reproductive organs. And just think about what chemicals you're sending to your body when you're stressed all the time. It's suppressing all the good chemicals and releasing or not releasing them and keeping them at hostage. So imagine, why should you be fertile if you're keeping everything else hostage? It's not going to have an organic, healthy environment to grow in, because it's being suffocated with these more high intensity types of signals we're sending to our body, that it's just not going to be an organic situation inside there. So really dive down and try to gain an understanding of really how stress is affecting our body as a whole some. And that really is something I find is necessary to gain an understanding, because otherwise it'll control your life and control all these things that we're talking about and hold you back from being able to live the life that you want to have. So, again, another thing is about talking about your heart rate and your blood pressure and just everything that's going on in your circulation system. And stress, you can feel that. That's a pumping of whatever energy throughout your body, and you can understand high blood pressure, even low blood pressure. Your heart rate is always in a high level when you're stressed. You can feel it. You feel it like right here. It just is very intense. It's very overwhelming, and it just doesn't send the right signals to our bodies, and we're constantly triggering adrenal glands, and it's releasing hormones that are now constantly being released all the time, not when they're naturally supposed to be released. So looking into the way that stress is affecting your blood flow and even constricting it. So I will be open and honest, I had this issue. It's something that I think I'm slightly still working through it, but really took a huge chunk out of my life. And it caused me a lot of pain. And where I suffered from was my lower half. I felt a lot of pain in my legs. I had varicose veins, and they weren't just cosmetic. Everyone thinks that they're a cosmetic issue, which they're not lovely, let's be honest, but they hurt. And it's because I had reflux blood flow in my great saphenous veins that the blood was flowing the wrong way. Blood only goes one way in each vein. And when your blood's going the wrong way, it sends this like rushing signal, this rushing sensation, sorry, in your legs. And it's almost like if you're on a roller coaster and you finally take that deep down dive on the track, it was that constantly, 24 hours a day, no relief. So I realized I was getting these circulatory issues, and like, but I'm so healthy and everyone's telling me I'm healthy. So what's going on? If I'm so healthy and I'm having these issues, what's the missing puzzle piece? That was. So really listening to your body, notice that your blood flow and all of the blood pressure things that you could be experiencing could be really related to stress. And there's not one medicine in the world that will conquer it and eliminate it and moderate it. It really starts with you. And yes, those things do help, and I'm not knocking them at all. They do have their place, but finding some other alternatives as well. So, when we're kind of in this high level of stress, we may start going through some additional mental and emotional states. And if you just find it really hard to move through the stress, to deal with the stress, to even find ways to cope with the stress, you may resort to some alternative avenues. Alcohol gets used a lot when we're stressed. I know that I did consume maybe too much at times, but now I'm actually happy where I'm at. If I ever want one, that's my choice. And I use it to benefit me and enjoy myself rather than abuse myself and numb myself. So, two completely different thought processes on how to use alcohol. Not knocking it, but what is your intention of using it? Also, you may get into some sort of addictive behaviors and habits, maybe smoking or some sort of drug to just numb away the pain or escape or try to deal or use it as an alternative to fill the void, essentially. And if this is the concept you've adapted, then really think about the stress, the triggers, what's happening, why you're using it, when you're using it, and what's causing this change in you to need these substances in order to just move through your day and continue on. And also, it does affect your eating. Ever heard of emotional eating or stress eating? Such a big thing because we think it's going to come for us, comfort food. That's where that also comes from. And when you're stressed, you reach for comfort food. So that could be some really bad deep fried foods for you, or some really unhealthy choices, or overeating, or even undereating. Maybe you're not making the best decisions on what you're supposed to be taking in, or even keeping up to some sort of diet that's required for your body to work in whatever's going on with you. So maybe you need to have a diabetic diet, for instance, but you're not following through because you're so stressed out, you don't care. You're not motivated to take care of yourself. So your appetite is such a huge indicator about what's going on with you, because food should be used as medicine. That's always its ancient reason of why we used it. It's the type of medicine that we use, regardless if it's herbal or in a food form, plant form, animal form, whatever it may be. Food, regardless, in its whole self, is meant for us to use for our body to fuel it. So depending on what you put in is going to fuel that way. So think about, I'll just use my motorcycle. It needs premium gas. I put basic gas because I don't feel like spending the premium. What's it going to do? It's not going to operate at its efficiency. And I'm doing against what it's supposed to be. I'm working against it. Imagine working against your body and not giving it what it needs. So listen to it. Be aware what foods support you and maybe what foods don't support you, because sometimes not everything works for everybody. So really understanding that when you're stressed, you're reaching for the potato chips, you're reaching for the cake, you're reaching for the high carb foods, you're reaching for the deep fried stuff, fast food, takeout, processed food, all these different things. And it's really doing more harm than good. And really ask yourself, do you feel good after? Is this okay? Am I okay with this? Does it taste that good? Usually not. It's like a quick fix kind of satisfaction, but long-term wise, it's not really doing that good. You're just looking for your next fix, essentially. So also not eating enough food, you lose your appetite. You just have no appetite to eat. And then you start losing that muscle mass because that builds your muscles. And then you start dwindling away and then become very unhealthy. So it's about finding that fine balance and what works for you and what's important for you for your diet during stress and all the time, really. But that diet can help support stress and give you the resources your body needs to just replenish it and nourish it and just keep it optimal, so you can just have that great body and great sensations all the time, regardless if you're stressed or not. So also when we're eating, I just want to bring up this point because I think we've lost a lot of this in our culture, is eating with friends or family, but not by yourself or not in front of the TV or scrolling on your phone or whatever distraction is around you. Actually being in a social setting. And I know in my culture, eating together is very important. And I love eating together. I love how it brings people together. It just creates that environment. Everyone's having a good time. Everyone's enjoying themselves. Everyone's enjoying the food. People are talking about it. They're so grateful for it. It's just such an experience all around. And to share it with people that you love and care about, what a better experience. So I go all out when it's dinner time or whatever, I'm eating with people. And even when it's just myself and my husband, I still go all out. And I'm working on that Mindful Kitchen series to keep bringing you some dishes, but got to work on my food photography. But this is just something that is so necessary, the social element of eating. It gets us talking. The food digests differently. We ingest food differently. Maybe you chew your food even more. Maybe it's a better appreciation for what's in front of you because you can enjoy it with other people. And I really love eating together. It's just feels good all in all. And imagine the emotional boost it gives you as well. So such an important thing. Do it as much as you can. So this is looking at stress. I want to just bring some better information about stress and the burnout that it can lead to burnout. It can be the number one causation of burnout. It can keep burnout heightened. It can just bring burnout really as a whole picture very dominant in your life, and looking at it looking at it from a whole picture and really understanding why stress is such a huge factor in our life and where to find that happy medium to not allow it to take over and then result in burnout. Where when we've talked about burnout signs and just what emotions that you can go through, these are pretty dominant emotions. So, and also very dominant characteristics that you can be going through and experiencing. So, if you're in that burnout mode and you know it, you will know it. It's all of these and then more, and you're just not feeling very well in your body. You're burnt out, and don't neglect it in your mind. Accept it, and then find some ways to work out of it. So I hope you're able to get some value out of that today. I look forward to seeing you soon.